Welcome to the portal to New Sovereign Aerthe, an interdimensional landing strip for beings who know their power. Come, collaborate, learn, and co-create our collective heaven on Earth. Brought to you by Tempus Aquaria, where you can find exclusive members-only content like events, shows, classes, and even invites to on-site retreats. You'll learn everything you need to know in order to build the new Sovereign Aerthe. I'm your host, Kalina Lux. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn notifications on. So we've got a mixed group today. Some people on here are like super big fan of your work. I personally, your work is to me a breath of fresh air. You're the only person that I have found that is talking about the truth regarding the PSYOP with law. And of course, let's get into that after I introduce you and all those great things. Gabriel, welcome. Good to see your faces, you guys. So just for anybody listening in, this will be a little different than normal. Normally we have our little like protected portal that we put everything on. But because I felt that the information that Clint is going to share with us is so profound that the larger communities really need to know this before they go get themselves in a soul contract with the Vatican. So, because it's really popular, as you know, but.
And that is a true statement. I mean, it really is. It is coming out of Rome, ultimately. So,
yeah. Okay. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our guest of honor. We've been waiting for this for a long time. Clint Richardson wrote the book Strawman, the real story of your artificial person. He's got some epic documentaries and films out there. If you're a Crow fan, right? Okay, Tim's showing your book right there. He's displaying he got your book. If you're a Crow fan, he is episode 110 and 149, where he gives an intro into the Strawman. If you haven't heard those, if you're new to law, really just start there. And then he goes into the CAFR, which I hope we'll get to touch on at least a teeny bit today. And really, though, I think where Clint's work really shines is his latest work with Red Pill Sunday School, where he goes in deep, not only exposing the fraudulent activity at the governmental levels, but then he brings it down to earth and tells us how they're trying to, in my opinion, co-opt a movement that has laced in truth, and how they're getting to capture you even more. So he goes into the on the ground PSYOP as well. And I just feel like Clint's work has been a breath of fresh air for me personally, because I started off falling for all the Kool-Aid and all the shiny bells and whistles with, you've got your accepted for values and all these kinds of things you could do. And a little bit, but then I quickly was like, wait a second. And the more and more law I studied, the more and more I was like, something isn't sitting right within my soul. And I took a huge back seat and I watched a lot because we have a lot of people in the temple that share and practice law, and they're studying and they're trying with their pureness of their intentions to find, solutions to this situation we find ourselves in, which Clint will go into in a little bit. And I could not continue on in good faith if I didn't bring somebody like yourself to set the record straight for at least what I have found within my intuition. So, Clint, thank you so much for being with us today. You're doing a big service to humanity. Do you want to just maybe start off with giving us a little tiny background into the law, what you know, and then just transition into whatever you like from there?
Well, you can say that I've gone kind of full circle. Because a lot of people that get into this, they start with, you start out, of course, with the romanticism and the history that whatever your country you're from or you're residing in or whatever, there always has to be that historical mythology, in our case, the founding fathers and all of that stuff, that when you actually examine that history, just completely falls apart. You find out a lot of things. One of the earliest things that I discovered Is that they're all related. They're just how did England take back over America? Well, they established the United States, and through these nation states across the world, they took over all the countries. And I was really surprised to find out as I'm doing this research recently about the nation state model. First of all, because we don't learn international law. We all start internally, right? Which is kind of like starting out as a child. Okay, I learned about the Constitution, and then I learned about this, and I learned everything that they taught in school, and then we branch down, we start talking about liberty and all the things that are sort of the mythos, what I call the patriot mythology, not something I coined, but it's so apropos. Because if you think about it, every country, the Queen of England, the Pope, everybody has to have a history. What justifies the current governmental system of the United States or any country? It's the history, right? Without that history, there is nothing. And this is why you have, as you said, the media has sort of taken on the persona of the truth movement now. The Fox News is pretending to be the alternative. And it's always constantly putting forth the narrative of this, Constitution and why we should worship it and how our rights come from it and, all this stuff, which none of this turns out to be true. And so what we learn essentially is from a child's perspective, which is in my own house. My parental guidance says the rules of the house are this. Right? So that's internal. That's the law within the country or within the state or within the nation. Keeping in mind that there's no such thing as a nation. Something else I discovered, nation is actually a concept. It's a spiritual concept. It's a belief system, if you will, that when the nation state model, which is basic political science, when the nation state model takes over, there's this now you're getting into this international thing. The purpose of the United States was to establish a international trade basically area commission. And the reason for the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, even George Washington said so at the time, was an appeal that it wasn't original, that there was nothing special about it, and that it was an actually appeal to the international community. And it was exactly what was the thought, the revolutionary thought at the time. Nothing really special about it. And it was designed to establish this nation state model. Now, if you go back to the Treaty of Westphalia 400 years ago, that's pretty much where this whole nation state started. And what I found as I'm researching is like one of the other fallacies that we have is that we're a republic. Well, no, we're not. I mean, well, technically we are. But if you look internationally, every country in the world just about that's not a monarchy or some other form of tyranny is also, we were all tricked into becoming republics, as they say, self-governing entities. Well, if you're a self-governing entity, if you're a self-governing people, a commonwealth, which is what republic really means, well, then you damn well better know, one, international law, two, the law that you're establishing that allows the international body to recognize you, etc., right? And so what happened is all these countries, I mean, you look, what is China? China's a republic. What is Russia? Russia is a republic. Well, wait a minute. These are supposed to be the bad guys. How can China, this communist thing, also be a republic? Well, I mean, it's every country in the world. Then I look further and I see, wait a minute. The United States is recognized internationally as a state. But California is not. New York, Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland, these are no longer recognized as national bodies. No, they're not states and the only states in the world are the United Nations. And the United Nations is a group of nation states. Oh, man. So I'm like, wait a minute. According to international law, Great Britain isn't its own entity. It falls under the United Kingdom, which is a nation state. California, Utah, where I am, Puerto Rico is a possession. I mean, for God's sake, that's not good, right? A possession of the conquering United States, the conquering nation state. They conquered us. And when you look at what a nation state is, the definition of a nation state, you find that a nation state is that which purchases or conquers a people, a territory. And so I'm going, wait a minute, this goes against everything. What happened to states' rights? Well, wait a minute. How is a state formed? Well, first, a territory is created, and it belongs to the United States. Northwest Territory, right? Louisiana purchase. It turns out purchase means conquer. Whether I conquer you with money or whether I conquer you by force, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. You're falling under my law. Now you bring in the rules of war, the labor code, and the international rules. And you find that when a nation state conquers a people, and think back to the Civil War, when the United States, this thing that suddenly exists as its own entity, is now conquering these southern states. Wait a minute, how is this possible that the United States, which is supposed to be states that are united in compact with no power whatsoever, it's not an entity in and of itself, how is it suddenly this powerful body with this powerful military? Well, it conquered us, and we are listed, and everybody in the world at this point is listed as a conquered people. Now, the rules of war, the Lieber Code, General Orders 100, and the international rule says that the conqueror, and I know this is probably hard to take for people, but the conqueror generally will leave the system of law that's already in place. They'll leave it going because, you can't just suddenly throw people into communism or throw them into, they just generally say, okay, you're going to replace some of the politicians, but essentially the system's working. We're going to let it go. It's already based on English common law, so what's the problem, right? So we have this delusion because we have grown up only, and I think all countries are kind of like this, unless you delve into political science and this kind of stuff. But the movies and television always tell us that political science is, it's, you study political science, you're not going to get a job. It's ridiculous. It's for geeks, it's for politicians. You don't need political science. Turns out this is the basic model of political science, something we don't talk about. We don't talk about international law. Now, when I went back and I remember trying to get the Informer and James Montgomery and other people who had gone down this same road, first studying the national law and then starting to understand international law, reading the Law of Nations, that sort of thing. They too were like, okay, I'm done. There's no further point in continuing because a conquered people has none of the rights that we attribute to ourselves. None of those rights that existed, God-given rights, in other words, that existed before all of this happened, before the United States was established by the Constitution, and a nation state was essentially formed and then perfected later on. These guys quit the truth movement long ago when they discovered international law. And I agree completely with them when I say that everything we're going to talk about today is not my belief. It's not how I want it to be. It's not how I don't want it to be. It's what I've discovered. And it's what cancels out that patriotic fervor that has been ingrained into us, because that's the only thing that keeps us actually conquered is our actual belief that we are somehow a free people, right? That is what really, really gets us. And so what you have to then discover is there are two languages happening. And we are constantly being tricked into the bad language, sorry, the really bad language. There's two languages happening, a natural, truthful language where we express ourselves, and then there's this legal version, the Roman law, essentially, the strict law, that's been around for a very long time. And we are constantly being tricked into essentially inverting all of our meaning, because that's what the legal language does. It inverts the meaning of the natural term into a fictional, often opposite day kind of thing, where you, even though you don't intend it, you're entering and you're confirming and you're ratifying everything in the legal realm, because you're speaking a language that is exactly the same as the English language, but it turns out that the English language is actually called Dog Latin, and it's the grammatical set of the Latin language, the law Latin, and there's three different levels of understanding that, and the highest is law Latin, and the lowest is Dog Latin, which is what the general population speaks. So we're caught in this linguistic sort of nightmare where we think we're saying one thing, and we're saying the other. The whole purpose, if you use the colloquialism, the devil, right? The devil is always the adversary or the inversion of the truth, right? And that is what we're caught in. And that is because we believe we have freedom. And we do, it's just legal freedom. Well, what's the difference? Well, one is real freedom, and we call that negative liberty, and one is positive law liberty. Well, again, how can those two be different? Well, one is to be free to say no to all of this. One is to be contracted within all of this and be kept from true freedom. And it turns out that freedom in the legal realm, the bad realm, the fictional realm, means franchise. And if you can understand that, when we say freedom of speech or freedom of religion or freedom of this, wait a minute. I have a set of strict Roman law that is freedom, and it means that I must be subject to and follow the law that freedom is under. If I'm a franchise of McDonald's, or if I'm a franchise of Macy's or whatever, yeah, I have that home rule, I have that independence, right? I'm free, but I'm a franchise, and so I have to always be under and controlled by and under the main law of the mother corporation, which is, in this case, our case, of course, is the United States. And the birth certificate, the purpose of the birth certificate, as listed on the Texas website anyway, is to is to give you domicile in the United States and only residence in Texas or whatever state, so that your law, your domicile is this thing that's not even in the United States. It's not one of the 50 states, completely foreign in Washington, D.C., something that was created by Congress, a purchased area, a conquered area, and this is where we lie. We lie in this franchise. And so this whole monopoly board is extended from the United States all into all the 50 states. The state governments are federal. The municipal corporations have been set up to rule everything. And, you're under this corporate, commercial, international rule, which if you do anything internationally or interstate, it's always going to be under United States. United States handles all interstate or international commerce. Well, what if If you're its citizen and you reside in a foreign place like California or Utah, well, then you're automatically doing business in a foreign international setting or interstate setting because you exist in the United States. Your person, I should say, your straw man exists here. You're doing business as I'm doing business as Clint Richardson in Utah. That includes everything. That's driving my car. That's all these different things because the way they really get you is through insurance. Insurance is 24/7. You're insured. The whole thing's about insurance. And if you've got insurance, you've got a pension, you've got all these different things, then you're stuck and 100% of the time are expected to act in that legal persona. And so you're in a franchise. You are in a state of positive freedom, which means you can do anything you want as long as you follow the law and not just follow, but are completely under and to start this out right, I always like to direct people to Title 42, Section 1981. Which, if you heard me talk, any other talk, I always try to get this into every radio show because if you want to understand what freedom is in the legal realm, what franchise rights are, it says you have the right to be put in pain, to be punished, to be taxed, to be licensed, and to be extorted or exacted. Now, I don't know anybody in their right mind, and my argument is that none of us are in our right mind, that would accept a contractual situation like citizenship, a voluntary situation, where my right is to be extorted. Right? My right, yes, I agree that my right is to be punished, put in pain, tax, license, and extorted. No one in their right mind would agree to that, but we don't know. That's just one example. We don't know we're agreeing to it because we don't know the law. Again, who in their right mind would follow a law that would fill up this room 50 times that no politician, no idiot savant could possibly remember the whole law or know it, let alone all the treaties and all everything else? We are under a system of law that it is virtually impossible to know and to follow, and it changes daily. That is our franchise. That is our citizenship. We've been taken out of our natural born place, which they called the States United or the United States, a compact between states, states being people. And we've been removed into this corporate district, right? Oh, what is a district? Every word that comes up, you have to define. A district means a place of distress and distraint, of seizure. That's what a district is. There's no exception to that. A district is somewhere that distrains you, that distresses you, and that has you in its seizure. Seizure being a term of property, right? It's very similar to the word Caesar. So these are the problem is not necessarily the belief system, that old patriot mythology, or what you would call a religious belief system. That's not the problem. The problem is that we've all been tricked into abandoning our children through the birth process into this foreign entity. It's not part of the United States, not part of the republics that we call states, the people that we call states. And so we have to start from that position and understand that, therefore, we are all under and completely entrapped in international law. Not this local or house rule, right? That's like saying that the law of the prison is the law of the state. No, the law of the prison is to handle the prisoners, the domestics, which is what we are. You don't confuse the internal affairs of a corporation, the employee rules, an employee handbook. You don't confuse that with the law that governs the corporation, right? Well, that's all we are. We're just a corporation of the United States. Everything has been put into this corporate municipal structure. So I'd like to get that, first of all, set in people's minds, because at that point, is there a point in trying to use that system, literally a prisoner law, a law for people who've been conquered, that can be changed or suspended at any time by a declaration of war or emergency, that is essentially, it's a lawless system pretending to be law? Can you then say, well, I'm protected by a trust, or I'm in a private association, and you can't therefore do? Well, use another country, isn't it? Could I do that in, say, North Korea? Or is it a belief system? And if your people have a belief system, don't you really have to be that people? If you're a Christian, don't you actually have to act like Christ? If you're a patriot, don't you have to really become that thing in which you say you are, and that belief that well, none of us are doing that, right? That's our problem. We are completely and 100% in a simulation, which means hypocrisy. That's it. We are in 100% a system designed to support and allow our hypocrisy. And to me, that explains everything, because everything we do, and people aren't going to like the sound of this, some people anyway, everything we do is actually against the foundation of our common law, which was brought over from England. The common law, believe it or not, common law is the Bible. The Bible is foundation of common law. All the maxims of law that are protective of men come from the Bible. And that is shocking to discover, because I grew up hating religion. I grew up hating the Bible. Therefore, thinking that religion, or that the Bible is a religion. No, it's a book of law. And when I say, so now we have legal freedom, we have franchise, which is an inversion of real freedom. Now you can understand what real freedom is, and how you understand that. The most simple way, a friend of mine said this the other day, and it's really been eating at my craw. He said, look, did you ever notice that, see, this system over here, yes, it's voluntary, but once you're in it, it's like joining the military. Nothing's voluntary once you join it. Once you contract, you're under contract. You're under a commitment to do things that are completely against the law of nature. But in the law of nature, law of God, where they say you have God-given rights or inherent rights, the only thing you have a real right to do is to say no. No, I will not contract. No, I don't respect persons or flattering titles. All the things that the Bible tells you not to do. And that's what's so interesting about the Bible, is that when you get to the nitty and gritty of it, the only thing it ever tells you is thou shalt not. Over here, you shall. You shall be extorted. You shall be under contract. You shall obey the rules and regulations and codes and everything else that's put for you. Over here, thou shalt not. You see, if you never respect persons, which are corporations, which is what we act in, straw men, right? If you never respect flattering titles, kings, magistrates, presidents, if you never... Bible says don't go into surety. Don't respect any law that is against the law of nature. Now wait a minute. This is what we do every day on a daily basis, 24/7. We do everything that this book of law over here, not religion, but a book of law, says thou shalt not. So, that is where we stand. We have contracted ourselves into a system of international commerce, essentially. And by becoming part of that international nation state under United Nations, what's the number one goal of the United Nations? To put everybody into a person, a digital ID by 2030. Because you can't control men. You can only control persons. The laws of the United States apply to persons of the United States. And the hard part is to differentiate the truth from the fiction, realizing that you are in this system of hypocrisy and that you are acting in this simulation, or, if you will, a dissimulation. Both are important. And so you're in Latin, persona means mask, of course. So you're wearing a legal mask, and through the mask, you're getting all these protections and everything. What does the Bible say? It says, don't do that. Don't respect the person. There's no deer roaming in the forest saying, I feel confident that no bear is going to get me today because I have insurance. Right? It's just that's not how things work in reality. But insurance is the mainstay. It's everything. So I'll stop talking because I can rant forever on this. So sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's typically in our meetings, I like to give the guests like full control and full reign. In your case, because I have so many questions for you, I'll definitely maybe take a little bit. It'll be a little different today, but first off, I think that you really, you nailed it in so many ways because you say the truth. You're able, with your studies, you have separated the truth from all of like the BS. And I don't know how you've done it. It probably is because you've been in the game for a long time and you've been studying. But to any newcomer, like I've only been studying around 3 years max in the world of law. And I only did it because I needed here a solution for, the mandates with the injections in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. So that's what got me really heavily focused into law. If you hear any squeaking, it's because the baby peacocks are here with their mama eating right next to me. I'd show you, but my whole setup would fall over.
That's awesome.
They're very cute. But so that was why I kind of was forced to start my studies into law. And quickly, I was very focused and goal oriented. So luckily, me personally, I didn't dive too far down any of those rabbit holes where it talks about all the paperwork and all the UCC stuff. However, I do see that a lot of community members have fallen in these traps. My biggest concern is that I have potentially misled people just out of my naivety and my excitement and desire for these things to be true and really truly wanting solutions to get us out of this. So I have a few questions for you. I would love it if you would talk a little bit on Unidroit and why a lot of these movements are coming from the Vatican, and just basically touch on that, because I think almost every person in here, if I can see all 18 people, actually I can't see them all right now, but I do know a lot of them are very deep into law, and we just want to know the truth. We serve the truth. And I think the beautiful thing about the temple is when we see that we've erred, it doesn't even bother us that we're not triggered. We're just like, oh, let me correct. So
which is unfortunately a rare trait in modern people. It's unfortunate. And I had the same concern. This is why I started changing my tune, because I decided at the very beginning of my research, I was just going to put it out there. Wasn't really doing it for anybody. I was only doing it for me. And, so maybe I could keep a log of my journey learning. And it was a good thing that I did that. But I never had the intention, nor did I ever sell one iota, right? That book that Timothy there was holding, if he would have asked, I would have buy it. Right, I would have sent it. I would have sent it to him for free, or say, can you pay the cost at least? Whatever it is. The only reason I did print it is because I went all these years doing radio and stuff. Most people have something to sell, or they're always promoting themselves, and I needed something to at least have some donations come in. And that was the best way I could think of it, was the sort of church model where if you like today's lesson, you can send an unconditional gift for this amount and we'll send you a copy. And I went off that and I said, well, that's how they're doing it. I looked up unconditional gift, and it turns out gifts, and it turns out charity, and it turns out forgiveness, and it turns out love, and all these things we're supposed to be doing can't be taxed, can't be right. You can't control them. This is the legal law doesn't control. The legal law can't force you, by the way, to be good. It can only force you to do bad things to others. Right, a constant state of competition. It cannot force people to love. It can enforce you to do things like tolerate, but it can't force you in your mind, body, and soul to do. It can only force your body. It can't force your mind and your heart. That's the interesting thing. Is again, the legal system cannot enforce good behavior. It can only prevent or enforce or protect bad behavior. So this is why people get in trouble for committing the crime of charity without having a license, right? Or trying to feed people and not having permission, or speaking and not having a free speech permit. Wait a minute. Well, oh, that's right. We're not in that mythological land of freedom. Yeah. So it's the question you wanted answered there, that kind of threw me off.
Yeah. So would you mind just going into your discoveries and research around what aspects of this are tied to the Vatican? What is the trap that we are, Unidroid?
Right,
yeah,
right.
all of that.
What I'd like you to do, I wrote extensively on this. You can go to Wikipedia for a quick reference, and you can type in the Uniform Law Commission. Okay. Now, Uniform Law Commission is a bunch of attorneys and former congressmen, former judges, Supreme Court judges, and they volunteer their time. It's all attorneys, all right? We have a very much a plague of attorneys in government. You want to know the problem? It's attorneys in government. But because they pledge their allegiance to themselves, not to their private association, not just their part. They work for the court, not for us. So you've got a severe attorney problem. To attorney is to give your rights up or change your allegiance, basically. So if you look up the Uniform Law Commission, this is strictly America, or I should say United States, you'll find that the trick of taking over the world is to, very much like Agenda 21 and the implementation of Common Core. They knew, these evil people knew, that they couldn't do it on a national scale. They couldn't implement it federally. But what they could do is they could say, okay, we're going to go to each state and we're going to lobby, and we have an unlimited billfold. That's unlimited amount of resources that will allow us to continuously lobby and eventually convince the people even to vote for something that otherwise they knew they couldn't get passed federally, that the people wouldn't accept it, right? And so the Uniform Law Commission creates all of these uniform laws, hundreds, at least over 100 uniform laws. One of those, and one of the we're most proud, is the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. They couldn't pass this federally, and so they pass it in each state. And if each state now has a uniform law, well, there's no need to pass it federally, right? You've bypassed the national system, and you've tricked people into passing uniform laws in all 50 states. Why Common Core didn't work? They couldn't get it passed. They could not get it passed in all the 50 states. Common Core, believe it or not, was created by the National Governors Association. They have a patent on it. The National Governors Association. Every political body, whether you're an attorney general, you're a governor, you're a mayor, they all have private associations, all located in Washington D.C. Okay, so they're taking off their local hat, they're going to Washington D.C., putting on their sort of international globalist hat, and they're saying, how can we pass this if we can't do it federally? How do we pass it in the states? And that's what happened with this. Common Core was a creation of the governors. The governors, which to me is treason, but okay, the governors get together, create and patent a form of education that is absolutely ridiculous. Basically, I mean, technically, most of it came from the ADL, and pass it. And they start implementing it in the military. They start implementing it and it's this horrible, horrible system. Well, they did the same thing with all these uniform laws. Again, if you look up the Uniform Law Commission of the United States, then you'll understand what UNIDROIT is. UNIDROIT stands for, I'm probably not going to be able to remember this, for uniform.
No worries. We got a guy in the group that's great at this. Tim will probably drop it in the group in like 20 seconds.
There you go. Well, it's essentially the world version of what we just described in every country in the United States, right? A system where now that the nation states have been placed in every republic, now that every place has been conquered politically by the nation state, by the United Nations system, now that because of that, the royal families are back in charge, because if you look at every president of the United States, you're going to notice a little strange thing that every president is a cousin of George Washington, and every president extends from the bloodlines of the kings and queens of Europe. That's no coincidence. That goes for CEOs of major corporations, Bill Gates, all these people, actors with any clout or voice, vice presidents, congressmen. When Obama was president, people thought Obama was black. Oh, you forgot his white mother. He's actually he's white according to law. Okay, remember that the legal law is an inversion of reality. The natural law, or the common law, recognizes blood right. Okay? Legal law is completely different. So what you find is that even in the definitions in the legal realm, it says specifically that white means pure blood. It has nothing to do with skin color. So Obama is white because his bloodline remains pure. Okay, that's hard for people to accept, but this is how it's been throughout history. It's the entire structure of the laws I cover in the book is about inheritance and who can have it and who, why do I need a will if my children have natural right? Well, you need a will because you're acting in person. You don't need a will in the natural realm. You need a license to marry because you're marrying two persons of the United States, property of the United States. You're not getting married in real life. It has nothing to do with God. It's all a legal, inverted thing, right? Nothing is real. It's hypocrisy. It's simulation. That's the problem. And so, again, this Uniform Commission on International Law or whatever, it's creating these bodies of law that allow corporations, in other words, persons, which we're not supposed to respect, persons to operate on the international level and then to contract with all of the people that have been assumed into these nation states. We all have this international sort of identity. And so what you're going to find, and this applies to every one of you, whether you want to believe it or not, or accept it or not. Again, I'm not interested in belief. I'm only interested in the contract that I can read. And the contract that I can read, which they call an end user agreement, is that little thing that pops up when you got this fancy computer that's allowing you to watch me right now and talk to you. You know, you can't wait to get that thing unboxed and placed. You pull up a video maybe to show you how to do it, and you click OK, I accept the end user agreement. What have you just accepted? An international law contract that says specifically you're under unidroit principles of law, which extends you into whatever country it decides. It says specifically you cannot use your own system of law. It says you must, that your law, or it'll say you're under the law of the state of Connecticut, or the law of the state of this, or the law of Berlin, or the law of, it could be anything. And to add on to that, that you cannot take Microsoft or Apple or any phone company that you're in, that you will go not to a court of law and have any chance of any kind of actual loss, the things that we think govern everything. No, you're going to go into arbitration. That means that an arbitrator, who's not a judge, who can be anybody, will be picked by, you've agreed to Apple or Microsoft picking who the arbitrator will be, to stand in as a judge, and that's who you will appeal your case to. All right, so without understanding, without knowing it, you've clicked on, which is the same as signing. You're expressing your consent by clicking that button. That's all that matters. That's all that matters in law. I know that offends the Patriot mythology view of things, but in law, sorry, all you need is an X if you're illiterate. You just need the expression of consent. And no, you're not required to know the law to be under it. No, as with the Bible and as with the legal law, the rule is the same. Ignorance is no excuse. Okay? But through ignorance, we click yes, I accept the terms and conditions of this contract, of this end user agreement. What else does it say? You don't own that phone. It says you don't own that computer. It says that Microsoft can come in at any time and change your programming. It says that remotely it can erase programs from your. It can do anything it wants to ensure that you're following the Microsoft guidelines or whatever company it is. And that's why you're seeing this shift where, like, I wanted to get Microsoft Word. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to pay you a monthly or a yearly fee to lease. No, I want to buy it. And I insisted that if I'm going to get it, I'm going to buy it. I still had to sign that end user agreement, though. So what you're seeing is now a shift to, and you're hearing them talk about that you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, that's talking about unidroit principles of law that cover things that are specifically contractually, internationally contracted out of the system of law in the country where you live into an international law system that can be played out anywhere in any system of law that's chosen that the parties agree with. Now, if you think about the reason that these things were created, for instance, Uniform Commercial Code. I don't know why people don't pay attention to every other code, because the Uniform Law Commission also created such wondrous beauties as Child Protective Services, right? These are uniform laws that were you allowed to happen. Okay, you allowed it to happen in your municipal corporations, your states, your counties, etc. The lobbyists came in and passed this Uniform Law Commission. So it might as well be a national law, but it's passed in every 50 states, and so they're happy. Now take that on a grand scale. The United Nations wants to pass something, because the United Nations is very much like the United States, except the United Nations is over all the nation states, all the what we consider to be countries, which we're wrong about. These corporations that pose as legitimate governments. Well, if they want something passed, well, then this Committee on Uniform Laws that's international are going to do the same exact thing. They're going to set it up as a national law in the nation, and if that can't happen, they'll turn to the framework that'll pass it in all 50 states, and soon you'll have this internet, something like UCC, that gets passed in all countries or all states, and you're suddenly under this system of law that allows you to be completely and utterly raped. And we're told, hey, look what UCC says. Remember, this is for corporations. This is not for you. If you're a decent human being, a good man, male or female, this is not for you. This is not designed for regular people. And when they tell you to put a lien on something, this is designed for corporations to do business in a really, really fucked up way. Excuse my language. This is not holy. This is not spiritual. There is no solution in UCC code. For one thing, you're in international law. That goes against the Patriot mythology. Why would you go in international law if you're talking about the states' rights and all that? None of this makes sense for us. We are not. This is for the other kind of person, the corporation, the association, right. Look up the definition of person. It can be you, or it can be several of you in aggregate, or in corporation soul or whatever. This stuff's not for us, and this is why we fail miserably. This is why every time you hear someone say, they'll even say I won in court. I'm like, really, you won in court? Do slaves win? Right? When a slave gets an extra pillow, did he win? Because he's still a slave, right? You're still in the system. You're still in the matrix. Just because the programmer programmed an extra pillow for you does not make you free from the matrix. Just because you're in UCC code, something designed strictly for corporations, does not somehow make you free. It only entangles you into a system of law that actually takes you out of that which you think you're operating in. The whole thing is horrible. The problem is it works for a very short time, or it appears to work, right? You think it works. Oh, I just put a common law patent on my land or my home. I just entered my home through UCC and did all this, and I accepted for value, and I did all. These things aren't meant for us. They're not. These are corporate things, right? So when they're for evil people, let's put it that way. They are to conduct evil business. There's nothing good about it, and you should recognize that if you just read through it. But most people, of course, like I said, remember Title 42, Section 1981. Most people don't read the law. Your right to be extorted and taxed and licensed and put in pain and punished. You don't know that's your right, positive right. So what ends up happening is that government eventually, it's inefficient, and it catches up on its paperwork. And you're sitting there thinking, another example, something that I thought was true, just like you said, you want to correct your errors, right? You don't want people to follow what you've said. I used to think it was true because someone told me, not because I read it, because the Patriot mythology, right? The religion. I used to think that you could write a letter to somebody, to a bank or to whatever, government, and say, if you don't answer this within 30 days, it becomes law. All right, makes sense, right? If you're not answering or you're not denying it, then you're accepting it, right? No, you're not a lawmaker. None of you are lawmakers. You don't establish precedent or law. That's for the courts. That's for the branches of government. This is not how things work, right? Now, inversely, if a corporation does that to you, it might work because you don't have the funds and the ability to access all of those uniform laws. And, I have a company that just went out of business because of a Medicare fraud against them. Medicare committed fraud against them. They can't afford the lawyers to fight Medicare because Medicare has an unending balance. So this beautiful, wonderful company that was actually a friend of mine who advocated for patients. Oh, you can't do that, can you? Because the medical system kills more people than it helps, right? So they put them out of business. They put them out of business, and I still can't believe it. You can't fight it because they're claiming government protection. You can't fight this private corporation. And it turns out that corporation makes its money, it's called Clarent, it makes its money by how much money it fines companies. And so it issued all these horrible, horrible fines for things that didn't actually happen. And even though they disputed them, they put them out of an $8 million company out of business, right? This is why I say, if they can do that to a corporation, what can they do to you and maybe your little private association or your trust or your whatever? Now, don't get me wrong, while you're in the system, it's best to go the trust route, right? If you've got assets, put them in a trust. Absolutely. That does not in any way, though, mean that you're somehow free or that you have this invisible legal wall that's going to protect you, right? Because, the second the government says, okay, you've done something wrong, we're going to seize everything, what are you going to do? Right? You and what army are going to it's just, you're a conquered people. Whatever rights you believe are ascribed to you, you've given up. Your inherent rights are God-given. Once you enter in the legal system, you've left the spiritual realm. You've left the realm of nature. There's no common law or law of nature left to you. You don't have the right of tort. You don't have the right of common law. You're not in the common law. The common law begins with the Bible. You've abandoned it, not through any fault of your own, but because we've been tricked by those people who would pass the inverse, pass the adversarial law. So when it comes to Unijoy, you just have to understand it's a set of principles. It is not enforceable unless you agree that it's enforceable. You must agree through contract that those are the rules that will enforce that contract. It's for international stuff. UCC is generally for corporations and international commerce, interstate commerce. It is not designed for us.
We have a question in the chat that is very good. Somebody asks here, so somebody has been tricked potentially into doing the secure party creditor. Now, I was listening to one of your shows earlier where you spoke on this, and I was like, wow, no wonder I've never been drawn to this. I felt really divinely protected. Can you talk a little bit on how, would you say it's accurate to say that they're almost trapping and corralling you, so you think you're getting out, and they teach you, oh, this is what it is, and they teach you, oh, this is the truth, and then they give you a solution, but the solution is a trap to actually get you to sell your soul. Put I was listening to a guy who was saying, put your soul, every fragment of your soul, into the UCC1, so they can really come and take that. Now, to me, it's very evident at that point when they're trying to take your soul, possession of your soul, because you volunteered it.
You have to,
go ahead.
First of all, what is soul? What is the word soul? The word soul and the word spirit mean the same thing, okay? What is your spirit? Why is alcohol called a spirit? Well, because it gives you wings, right? Why is Red Bull, right? When a baseball player or whatever does a great play, that kid has spirit, right? Or when someone delivers a great speech, it's in the spirit of, right? So when you're talking about spirit, when something is incorporated, the purpose of incorporation and the purpose for the United States is to take away the ability to utilize the spirit. You got your mind, your body, and your soul. Your mind, your body, and your spirit. All right? At the top of that is the spirit. Below that is the mind. The question is, who controls the mind? Is it your spirit, your moral belief, your moral compunction, your moral choice? Or is it some other, controlling entity? We'll just say some demon or devil, which really just means attorney. Um, you're, you cannot have a free mind if you don't have a free spirit. You cannot have a free body unless you have a free mind, right? So it's in that order. That's the trinity of true freedom, is to always be making the moral choice, thou shalt not, right? No, I'm not going to contract. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to enter into this crazy scheme that you're talking about, right? Because obviously, I mean, what is a secure party creditor? What is a trust? All you're doing is exactly what's already been done to you, just creating another person. Right? Now, what they tell you, and this is the unfortunate part, really, is what they tell you. And I'm making another video on this, by the way. It'll be a long one because I'm just going to do one last one and call it good. But what they tell you is, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. There's a commercial on television right now. I've been seeing it a lot lately, and I don't watch a lot of television, so it must be out there. It's called Secure Title Lock. And it basically refers to these people, criminals, who will go in and through one piece of paper, they will take possession of your home. They'll do exactly what the gurus tell you to do, what the criminals tell you to do. Get it notarized, right? And then take that notarized paper, or either send it here. Don't follow the instructions that the government gives you. Do it as I say. Unless you do it as I say, you're going to fail. If you do fail, it's your fault. You didn't follow my instructions, right? That's what the guru will always tell you. So if you fail, it's always your fault. So what this commercial actually shows, and I'm very happy that this came out because it proves my point 100%. Because you've got now a clerk of the court comes on for a little commercial interview, and he says, yeah, what happens is, as a clerk, right, someone with no authority other than what is given to me, I cannot, even though I recognize this paper as fraudulent, I cannot say, we will not accept this. I have to take a fraudulent document that I know is a fraud. I know that this guy is going after someone's title to take it over and basically screw them out of their right, their ownership, sell the house out from under them, right? With one page document, as long as it's notarized, which is what they always tell you to do. And then they'll say, file it with a certain office. Don't follow the directions on the website, the government website, or what it tells you. Don't do it that way, for God's sake, because they'll reject it. You must file it here, because the guy says, I can't refuse it. I can't call it the fraud that I know it is. And so you've got these guys who are selling you something that they know is going to go to some clerk in some office that has to accept it, that cannot deny it, because their job is to simply take everything in, file it, and whoever goes over it and catches up, and when it gets audited later, that's when it'll be found to be fraudulent. That could take 10 years. So you're sitting in a property, perhaps, or you're sitting in some scheme that you've fallen for, all the while just waiting for this paperwork to be found out to be fraud. Now all of a sudden you have a tax lien. Now all of a sudden, because you're like, well, they've told me that I now own the house. I have a title, or they'll even tell you have a what's it called? An allodial title. You heard that thrown around, right? I got news for you, folks. The most important maxim of law that you must understand. Maxims are principles. They're never going to be broken unless you allow them to through contract. That's why they're, like I said, they come from the Bible. They protect you. The maxim of law, as a foundation, says that you will never have anything granted to you by the king or by the highest power. You cannot get a power or a status or anything that is higher than that which grants it to you. So you got to think about this. Who actually, or what entity has a allodial title? And the answer to that is the state. You do not get the power of the state. The state, the people, in other words, can grant you a perfect title. That would be like a fee simple. But you don't have the power of the state. You don't have the power of the king. Okay, the king is lawless. You're not lawless. No, this is what that foundation alone. When someone offers you if they're talking about land patents or allodial title specifically, it's bullshit, because you can't have a status that's equal to the king. Otherwise, the king couldn't rule over you. And so, but it sounds so good because you're going to be free on your own land and no one's going to be able to touch you because you're now the king of your. How many times have people said, Americans are kings, Americans are sovereigns? It's all bullshit. How can a conquered people be sovereign? There's no states' rights. There's no sovereignty in states. This is all patriot mythology. How can a state that is created from a territory that already belongs to the United States, that is created through a petition to Congress, where Congress then accepts the petition, forms a state, the president signs it into law that this territory is now a state? How is there sovereignty in any of that? They didn't sell it. They didn't release the land. They didn't release the territory. It's just now called a state and is governed on a local level. But every state constitution says that the Constitution of the United States is the law of the land, right?
I really like what you had to say about the state nationals. So what really drew me off of my path of studying law and going in depth, because I was going down that route myself. I actually took up the, I don't even remember what I was looking in, but it was on the internet. And I looked up the definition of national, and it said someone owing permanent servitude to a state. And now I was so completely perplexed because in one hand, I was getting told that in order to be sovereign, I need to get, be my state national and get all the 5 stars on my whatever and all this kind of stuff. And I am a person, like, unfortunately, I suffer what is called science brain. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm like with the silly science on TV, but it's that my brain is like, okay, great. Show me the proof. Show me the proof. Okay, great. And I can't be placeboed. And so as I'm studying more and more law, I'm really excited to learn about it. But all I'm seeing is a bunch of BS, a bunch of people who are selling their programs for thousands and thousands of dollars. And I've bought a fair share of them. and after about a year of that, I'm just like, I really can't do it. So my question, do you think that it is also partially, because we can tell that there are a certain amount of people that are being targeted, like a certain type of individual. Do you think that this is another ploy, given what we see on the FBI's website? Do you think that this is a bunch of like a tactic to get more people in the penitentiaries in the long term that are of a certain ability and mental caliber, because maybe they need some kind of prison labor that requires intelligent people? Well, I don't know.
Reverse your thought for a moment. You must realize that the United States as a jurisdiction, a district, it is an open air debtor's prison. Already, you're in a prison. You just they found that the slave that gets to choose his profession is much easier to handle because they think they're free. So you're already in what I call an open air debtor's prison, right? You're already in that. So it should be, and the debt part, you have to understand there are two different kinds of debt. They're the same, but it's really hard to put them in the same category. One is monetary. That's the kind we're all used to. But if you think about that, that just means that, okay, if I'm in a monetary debt, then I'm going to perform according to the contract that settles that debt. That means I'm going to pay a certain amount every month, amortization, whatever. So really, all debts are what are called performance debts. So debtors to the United States are not necessarily monetary debtors. They're performance. We are performance. We must perform what they require us to perform. We must follow their law. We must do all these things. And as debtors to corporations, they make the law that allows banks to amortize our debt and to steal through mortgages, dead pledges, to steal our property when we don't pay. Anybody who had land or anything, the second you incorporate that land that was private, once private, the second that you incorporate anything, remember, incorporation takes away the spirit. You've lost the spiritual connection to the land. You no longer make a choice that the lawmaker does. So again, when you're an employee, what does to be employed mean? It means to be used. That's what it is to be an employee, is to be used. Okay, when a corporation hires you to use you for your labor, something that you should not be separating from yourself, right? What is the product? What is the product of your labor, right? That which you either build or bear. If the child is the product of labor, well, then communism says, yeah, the product of your labor can be sold because you're no longer claiming property over that product. And this is why corporations own everything. You're brilliant scientists and you've just invented the cure to cancer, and you say, okay, let's release it to the world. It's, we don't even need to charge people because it's this nut in Brazil that no one's ever found before. Oh, no, we gotta synthesize it, change it so it's unnatural, patent it, and then charge people $500,000 for the treatment, right? So you no longer own that product of your labor, your thought, your experimentation. The corporation does, because you've agreed to be used by that which takes away the spirit, right? So there's no spiritual connection to your product, whether that's your child or the second you go into the legal system, the spirit is dead. And amazingly, if you don't believe me, look it up. It's in every legal dictionary. To be a person or to be in the legal realm is said to be spiritually dead. Those who are spiritually alive or legally dead are people in monasteries, people who have devoted themselves to a life lived according to God's law. That's it. That's the only free people there actually are. And that's why I'm like, when you start to see that the legal system starts referencing the common law, the Bible, and starts saying, okay, religious people cannot be enslaved. That is people who follow the law religiously, right? Not because you believe in something. Amazing. If I were to put a word on what the Bible is, or what it really is telling you, it's kind of like it's saying get rid of all beliefs. That one should only believe in what is true. That all these fictions can't, do not put any faith or belief in them. That means do not love them or hate them. Either way, you're giving them some kind of credit or some kind of existence by your belief in them, right? So this is basically a book that says stop believing. It's not religion. You're to follow a system of law that is this negative, I will not do this. And that becomes your religion. I will not taint my blood, as you were saying. I will not taint my spirit. I will not accept any lies. I will not teach my children the myths that we teach our children to confuse the hell out of them for some reason. Right? You research the Santa Claus, you find out it was this little elf evil Christ character from some ancient culture, right? Craziness, the stuff that we do to our children to confuse. And why are we celebrating Halloween? Why are we celebrating these things? And I think the answer is pretty clear. If you're going to develop if you're going to change the nation, the spiritual connection of the people who originally formed the compact between themselves to protect one another from all other encroaching forces, including an organized central government like the United States, well, then you must change that culture into things that are that nation, that idea of the nation, into something that's superficial. Now, I stress again, and I did not know this until just recently, that there is nation is a conceptual, spiritual thing. It is not a when we say that we are a nation, you'd be referring to each state that's in compact with the other, with like-mindedness, protecting each other's rights against all again, including any central government. So the idea of a nation is completely spiritual. And I was really surprised to hear that, because, again, if you can change the foundation or the structure of the nation and turn it into this patriot mythology and turn it into this, get people to start pursuing things that are like UCC, that are completely and 100% opposed to any idea of nationhood, any idea of protecting yourself by remaining private or foreign from any of that, but you're directly entering yourself voluntarily through contract into a whole system of foreign law. So that's how you destroy a nation, but you're not destroying the structure, the infrastructure, or anything like that. You're destroying the people. You're destroying the spiritual release and ability to say no of the people. That's where we stand today. That is our problem, is that, well, I mean, the other aspect of this is I now call the truth movement, the patriot movement, the whatever movement, whatever name it's being given now, I now call it the false redemption movement. Okay? Because all these gurus out there are trying to get you to follow the rainbow, which doesn't actually exist, to the pot of gold. And it's always a monetary reward of some, whether it's a property ownership or a title. What does the Bible say? Don't respect titles, right? Everything about it is a reward in what is said to be the root of all evil: money, the love of money. You're pursuing redemption, but we're forgetting that Christ is the Redeemer. Oh my God. Now, most people, when they hear that, like I used to be, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to hear another, this a-hole preaching something I don't want to hear. And I actually wrote 3 books. The second book is about what the hell is Christ? Why is Christ the Redeemer? Why are people confusing Christ with God when Christ is actually Logos, right? What is Logos? Logos is the law of nature. Well, how do you tell the story of the law, or for that matter, anything, unless you personify that concept into a character, right? So what are you supposed to do if Christ is the Redeemer, and Christ, the word son, the word law, and the word The word of God is Christ. The law of God is Christ. The Christ is the example for you to follow. You don't worship Christ, you follow Christ in order to worship the concept of Jehovah, which we haven't really gone into, but Jehovah, the name of God, as they say, isn't a name. It's one of the most beautiful concepts that woke me up to this. What really made me look at the Bible is I said, what is this Jehovah thing? Why is there a debate on it? Why is it not in the Bible more? Turns out it was in the Bible over 6,000 times, but the church came along and took it out. Even though it's on many ancient church buildings. Well, why? Well, one of the problems with the Bible is people don't know what God is. Why would you write an entire book about God and never define God? Why would you use a generic term like God, which in the dictionary could be king or magistrate or judge or anybody that has power over you that you allow to have power? A God is a generic term. Why are they using this term? Well, it turns out the Catholic Church came in and changed the words and replaced the word YHVH or, the Latin, the Greek, whatever. And which was a very ancient concept dating back to before Plato. And you have this book now that says God did this. Sometimes it'll have God said to God that God is this. Like, wait a minute. The Lord said to God and God replied. Wait, this is confusing. Well, if you read it in the context it was written, it would say, and the king said to Jehovah, and Jehovah said this, or Christ said this, all metaphoric, of course, because you're personifying existence, that which is truth. God is truth. Jehovah is truth. Not anything man-made, not lies. Truth is never what comes out of my mouth, right? Anything that comes out of my mouth is either going to be self-evidently true or it's going to be questionable, and you're going to go and pursue and see, can I see the self-evidence in what's being said? Jehovah is defined as existence or self-existence, self-evident. Okay? That is God. So you're talking about all of the universe, nature, us, everything, and the whole idea of what the Bible is trying to tell you is that you must remain self-evident. You must remain self-existence. Therefore, do not accept fictions. Do not accept masks. Do not accept persons or flattering titles like king and magistrate and president and all these things. Do not be surety for another. Do not do all these legal things, right? Do not respect money. Do not respect valuation or mammon. All these things are not of self-evident nature, self-existence. They're not creations of God, if you will, right? So you have everything that's man-made, whether that's a physical thing, where you take your resource source, you take nature and you make it into your own creation, or whether that's symbols, numbers, letters, words. None of these things are true. They're tools used to discover or communicate the truth, but the problem is that we have allowed words to become truth. The legal realm is built upon nothing but words. It is a word salad, and we're right in the middle, mixed up in it, and we believe that the words have both meaning and authority. And so we're ignoring the self-evident truth. We think that we can't, for instance, if you want to be extreme, we can't prevent a massive corporation from tearing down the entire Brazilian frickin' forest because the law, the word of law created by men says, Well, no, we're going to protect such actions against God. What does the Bible say? What does the law of, men say? Even in the maxims of law of the court, it says when God's law, or the law of nature, is being ignored or tread against, that law must take precedent over man's law. That is even in the legal system. It's amazing when the evidence that you find in the legal system to support this is amazing. One example of that is in insurance. We have an act of God. Wait a minute. That means whatever your belief system is, you're like, and I don't believe in any of this religious nonsense. I'm telling you, it's not religion, first of all. But I will also back it up by saying, look, you believe whatever government believes. Government believes there's a higher power than it. What is that power? Well, what is an act of God? What is an act of God defined as? And why in your insurance policy that you've agreed to, therefore you believe in this higher power too? What does it mean? What is an act of God? It's simple. It's an act of nature, an act of truth, something not of man. So when I say that you should worship God, or Jehovah, to be accurate, I'm saying you should worship truth. You should worship nature and the universe in its purity, and you should be the defender and husband to its land, husbandry. You should do everything you can to keep it pure, because otherwise, like me, you're going to end up getting cancer from tainted well water from some military corporation that has no liability. Are you seeing that on the commercials now, right? If you were in Camp Lejeune, stationed there between these years and these years, the military completely poisoned you and probably gave you cancer or some other disease, and now you have a class action lawsuit where you could get money for your illness. Wow, thanks, that's great. When you treat God, or when you ignore the laws of nature, of God, of nature, well then, judgment, if you piss and crap in your own water supply, your judgment is to get sick. Right? You're not talking about some man in the sky that's an artwork of the church, judging you and constantly watching you. No, you're the arbiter of your own judgment. The more you allow what is happening right now, where men act in flattering titles that don't exist in nature and therefore have authority, that you allow them to have, because the legal law, man's law, says they have more power than you. They are persons and they have equal rights. These corporations, they can destroy nature and you can't do anything about it. The longer you allow this to happen, then the more close we come to every frickin' dystopian movie you've ever seen. The more you allow technology to rule you and become part of your lives, the more that's going to become your nature, your reality, and you're going to forget that there ever was this beautiful thing called nature, this beautiful thing that you should be worshiping called God. But I really want you to understand that Christ in the Bible, it's like I've always been there. I've never, there's no life of Christ. It wasn't this story that's told in the Bible wasn't the story. You're supposed to believe it's a man because you believe it's God. Well, then you can't emulate God. But what you can do is follow the example of this guy who, at every angle, made a moral choice. He said no. When someone asked him a question, he'd answer in parable. He said, well, the fool will do this and the wise man will do that. He could never be accused of giving legal advice. You don't need to say this is not legal advice. You need to say, I'm offering you the choice. Because when you're offering a choice, you're not giving advice, right? It's so amazing when you realize what this book is telling you. But in order to do that, you have to give up every belief that you have of the Bible, all the hatred and all the all the things that people that you've heard, and you have to sit down, you have to look up every word. I mean, that's why I wrote this book, of course, these books to help. But I mean, you really do have to look, what was the intent? Why is this word God being used? Why is God killing children? Well, it's not God. It's a term used to represent a king or some other man acting in a flattering title, or pestilence or whatever. It's just so amazing. It's such a relief, because when I was studying nothing but legal law, which is your problem, you're 3 years into studying this legal thing with nothing to compare it to. Why does the legal exist? It's the same reason that this exists. The natural law exists to counteract the legal law. The legal law exists so you can be in hypocrisy too, and have some false protective vessel or persona against that which is your duty to man and nature. The two are 100% opposed. And yes, I'm sorry to say, they're made by the same people. They're written by the same people. The church created the state. The Pope divided the church and the state. That way, the state could forgive the church, and the church could forgive the state, and no one would ever get in trouble. And that's where we are today. In the Roman law that is now being basically contracted internationally through these nation states, and we're agreeing to these end-user agreements. We're agreeing to all this stuff. Unless we snap out of this, I don't think there is any return. The only way that we could possibly return would be some apocalyptic event, and we'd be back in the dark ages, because the internet would be gone, electricity, nothing would be left of this. We'd have all these structures, and we'd probably come up with a mythology that explains these structures, because I certainly can't build the World Trade Center, right? I can't explain these dishes, these satellite dishes. I can't explain all it, right? So unless we consciously turn this around, and the only way to consciously turn this around is to start acting in truth. And see, here, the problem that I've found, and one of the reasons I really can't do this anymore, is because literally, I mean, like I said earlier, I can't sell this. You can't sell the truth. Now, I can sell you redemption. I can sell you false redemption. I can tell you that if you follow this paperwork trail and you give me $1,000, then I guarantee you that for a while you're going to feel like you've been redeemed, right? But eventually they're going to catch up.
The cycle just continues.
Oh yeah.
And
Freedom.
People continue when you.
Yeah, freedom is paperwork.
And when you think you've gotten to it finally, and you come up against a problem, they just give you a different method and a different method. And they add more and more and more paperwork. So I'm really glad. So just as an intermission, I want to just take, I want to let you know that we're going to have to take questions here in a little bit, and we're going to have to make them quick, because I think a lot of people have a lot of questions. And I also want to say, if you are new to our temple, we often have different guest speakers with wildly different opinions than what we do. And we are of the practice where we try on their perspective for just the time that they're speaking, without any type of filter or trigger, just a curiosity, like, well, what if, right? And we truly try to take the value in search for truth. So this is where like our temple's ethos is. If you're new to our temple, that's all. But we're always open to discussion and the discovery and the pursuit of truth. But for the purposes of this, I would like to say, first off, Clint, thank you for that, especially sharing like the sincerity of your heart. We are a temple, and I had a lot of questions regarding what types of things we could do practically to get ourselves out and not consent. But it's interesting because as you've been speaking, I hear that we've already actually been doing that. We're a small temple, and we've kind of joined by this value that we refuse to pollute our bodies and our bloods. And we protect each other with a contract, basically a covenant to each other, that we're not going to do this, and we're going to keep our space sacred in this regard. And there's a lot of other things that we're consistently doing, and we're studying, but everything is kind of like, whether we're studying the esoteric or we're studying, law or even permaculture or gardening, everything kind of comes down to the more spiritual aspects and the underlying messages from the divine. And that's what I really enjoy about the people that tend to come to our calls, because they're really very, very intelligent people that are also, that share from the soul like you. So thank you. Okay, Tim, you're up.
Yes. First off, Clint, thank you for being here. It's awesome that you took the time to do that. I just really wanted to read some from your book, because we were just touching all over it, and it's just awesome. But from page 16, it says, though it is a strange concept at first, one of the most spiritual realizations we may come to is that the word, or law, contains no words at all, and is simply the purest and most harmonious life possible in respect of the law and laws of nature, or Jehovah, that any man may lead without obstruction. I don't know, it's just, whoo. And then we were
I
touching
wrote that?
Yeah, yes, you did.
It's a little strange to be quoted, I gotta admit. It's
And then over 287, you're talking about the Christian nation, how it's an oxymoron, a fiction of the mind, because, there can there be a creation of God, part of the verbosity of the reality of nature and supreme self-existence of oneness is what you described as God. And I just thought that was, I don't know, a great way to put into words, how I guess we all may feel.
and it's extremely difficult to accept those words in a time and in a I guess you could call it a place, or like I said, a simulation that is designed to 100% suppress that feeling, and that it's more than a feeling. It's like I said, it's an actualization, or because once you act in charity, pure charity, not legal charity, but pure charity, once you start acting in forgiveness, once you start doing these things, then you find no reason to participate in the legal system, because you don't need to take someone to court. I forgive you. I don't need the judicial. I don't need a permit to commit charity. It doesn't even make sense to me anymore, right? I simply act in the part. And what starts to happen is you start to feel good. You start to feel spiritual. You start to feel like you feel the disease, you feel the pain, you empathize, and you can see what's wrong with people. This lack of spiritual knowledge and understanding, and especially, like I said, actualization or acting within, and you do feel their pain. You want to help. You don't want to, as opposed to the guys who are trying to sell you false redemption, right, or paperwork. You truly want to help people. And I think the more that we do this in what they call civil disobedience, right? I realize that the law says I can't feed someone who's hungry, but I'm going to do it because it's right, not because it's legal or illegal, right? That just means that man made it a law, whether it's legal or illegal. I can make the most atrocious, I can make killing legal just by giving you a license, and it turns out license means lawlessness. I don't have any law regulating my actions. You don't find license in nature, right? You always must make the moral choice. If you're killing because you have a license to kill, you've made the moral choice, whether you even know it or not, to kill. right? And this is where we have to start acting as one, not just the belief. The belief part is easy, right? It's when you start acting. Then there are times when you will feel so good simply because you've acted selflessly, simply because you've acted without any desire to get anything in return. And yet you are getting so much in return because that feeling is so good. And if you can imagine that feeling, a feeling we very seldom get to experience because, again, it's illegal to help people practically. The Good Samaritan always gets sued or whatever. Once you start feeling that on a normal basis and you refuse what people insist they must give you money or something for your kindness or whatever, once you go down that route and that becomes your lifestyle, man, the feeling is worth it. It's better than any drug, right? It's better than any artificial, thing or religion or cult you can join. It is community. It is once it becomes sort of a cycle and other people start picking up on it, that's when you're going to know you've found sort of your paradise, if you will. And I will say one thing.
Well,
It's all
maybe
good.
this will help. You've equated, civil life to spiritual death, and that's exactly what you were just speaking of.
Yeah, those are legal. Those are actually legal terms, and
Yeah.
I was surprised to find that. I really was. It's not just me saying that. It's like, oh no, that's actually how the law works. You're either legal, where you're spiritually dead, you have no choice, no moral choice, because you're under strict Roman law, or contractual law, or you're always making a moral choice, and therefore no contract can bind you. And man, yeah, that is truly what it means, both spiritually and legally. And you got to remember, again, that's from the perspective of the government, right? Again, it's acknowledging that even you can have this higher power, and that it has to acknowledge you as such, that you are part. That's why it's important not to think of God as external from the universe, or some mad scientist, that's done. No, you're part. You were born part of Jehovah, the concept they use, right? You're born a part of that, and therefore, if you act according to it, they have no power over you. Now, I want you to understand that does not mean that some jackboot thug is, you don't have some magical spiritual shield around you. That if some military, foreign military comes in and invades you, you're not going to be able to I'm I'm a natural man. You can't touch me. That's not how this works. This is purely it's purely living a spiritual life is just like, again, the deer in nature or any creature that exists in nature. There is no insurance. There is no, I don't think most people can even imagine what it would be like to be wild, right? Which is a good thing because wild things are protected, right? You can't imagine what it would be to live according to this redemption. And that's why it's so important to understand that the law of God, the law of nature, the law of the universe is the Redeemer, not a fictional character in a book, but a personification of the law. The example that you are to follow is right there. So it's not the man or the character, it's the ability of yourself to be redeemed because you have followed the law. If you think about a redemption, what is a redemption? It's an end product. It's to be free of something, right? Whereas these guys are telling you, well, no, fill out more paperwork. Paperwork is freedom. We must continue a life of paperwork, and therefore we will be spiritually free. Well, no, that's not. That's obviously not a true statement. So the ability to say no to any paperwork, now that would be freedom. But constantly petitioning your master and fulfilling its requirements that's not freedom, you know? So I know it's, again, because I have nothing to sell to you guys, I'm not asking for anything. I don't want you to do anything. I can't tell you your next step. I can't say, well, this is what it's like to. I have not achieved this, as far as I'm concerned, this advanced state of spiritual being yet. I'm ready. I think a lot of people are ready to give it a try, but I can't tell you, I can't point you. You know, it's like in the Matrix or in the Bible. I can point you on the right path, but you have to walk the path. I don't know what your path is, and I don't know what my path is yet. That's the problem. You want insurance. You want a guarantee, right? All these things are legal concepts. There is no guarantee. There is no insurance. There's nothing I can give you. There's no collateral. You're either going to take that spiritual trip, walk that spiritual path, be on the right-hand side of God, or you're going to continue, right? And honestly, there's no judgment either way, because we've been raised this way. I don't expect most people to do this. The final thing I do want to say is that if you choose this path, this righteous, moral path where you're constantly choosing the moral right thing to do, you're constantly choosing truth over the lie. This is where you really have to understand the idea of persecution, because you're going to be persecuted like you won't believe. Think about it. I mean, think about right now. If you say, I want to put my child into, or I'm going to take my child, I'm going to self-educate, I'm going to homeschool, as they call it. Think about the persecution you get from the public realm, the public slaves who've all been indoctrinated in school to put their children in school. All these people who've abandoned their child to the state because they're not able to self-govern. And here's you saying, well, I'm going to choose to be a self-governing man, male or female, and I'm going to claim the parental rights of my child, abandon this legal realm, and be completely 100% responsible for the child, to where the court has no right to take that child away anymore because you haven't given it to the court. And I'm going to teach the Bible as the law, and I'm going to teach everything that's truth and everything that's wrong, so that this child never falls. And at the time, at the age of consent, as they say, where you choose to go into full-time adulthood, then they can make that choice. That's great. That's wonderful. But hopefully you've done your job and you've taught them the evils of the world, and they can see it for themselves. So you're going to be persecuted by people very much like yourselves, who are 100% brainwashed and indoctrinated into being a public person with a patriotic fervor, flying the flag of your conqueror. You're always going to be persecuted for wanting to do the right thing, because the legal realm has you doing the wrong thing at all times. And you need to be aware of this. This is why even the Bible says there's just going to be a remnant, a very small group of people who can mentally, physically, and spiritually escape this ultimate evil. And I say that with all, sincerity, because its basis is money. Money is the product of the United States. credit, debt, all of that. You're talking about the ultimate persecution because let's go back to the Matrix, right? The Matrix movie where you're in this.
Just so that you know, we got 3 more questions, but I want to get them in before thingy. But go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, I just real quick, where they're walking him through the simulation, and he says very specifically, he says, "These are all your potential enemies. All these normal people, the businessmen, the post office worker, the whatever, the woman out shopping for groceries, they're all agents. They're all agents. They're all, what is an agent? Agent is a straw man. They're all in the person, and they're all going to persecute you for not acting in their normal system of legal law. And you have to be prepared for that. And that's why the Bible says separate or circumcise yourself from, you cannot live amongst people who do not believe the same as you. It's impossible. You cannot have 2 laws that oppose each other. You cannot have 2 religions that oppose each other. You can't do it. You must separate yourself. So, I mean, you're already on the right track, it sounds like, up there in your mountains.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. I feel like all of us are pretty lucky to have found each other, which
the next
have like
step,
a very similar.
The next step, though, is to come together, right? To literally.
Agreed.
You know, it's one thing to be on Zoom. That's the easy way.
Totally.
But eventually, it's going to be necessary to find like-minded people. Again, just as the Bible instructs, because people are going to get outrageously persecutive of anybody that's not normal.
Okay, so my next, I'm going to ask a question on behalf of somebody who preferred that I ask it in the chat. She says, a trust is a solution, but is there a better recommendation to navigate the system but be protected? If you were to give 2 sentences on this question, what would you say?
In my research, the private membership association seems to be the correct route. However, you've got to remember that it is the inherent God-given right of private association, private meaning foreign, that you are exercising. You are not forming some kind of cult or group in order to be private. You're forming it only as evidence of your privacy, but the privacy, it's like everything else. It has to be real. It has to be spiritual. You have to not just believe it wholeheartedly, but you have to actualize it. You have to be able to be brave enough to stand up against the IRS, the FDA, whatever big organization is coming at you, and you have to be able to be like, right, in a nice way, in a respectful way, and say, I'm sorry, but we're operating privately. Private means foreign. All 50 states are foreign to each other, and all 50 states are foreign to the United States, the nation state. Okay, this is the way the internal system works. It still is that way for those who choose to be private. But remember, you can't just ignore the structure that is the conqueror's structure, which happens to be the same system, right? They kept this system. You must remember that to be private, to be the private people, you're now under the state constitution. Read your state constitution. Okay? That now becomes that's where your privacy is coming. Now you're in Puerto Rico, that makes it a little different.
It's a bit challenging. We're under Puerto Rican common law. But yeah, we are a PMA and a temple. So we're both, but you feel that, and I want to also say, currently I have studied a few different PMAs, and I feel that the ones that I've been seeing out there are not very
I don't
solid.
I don't like talking about them because people will be like, oh, well, gee, I could do, I mean, let's do prostitution or what else that's illegal?
Right.
Could you're trying to skirt around the law. That's not what this is. This is the ability to act spiritually, to heal, for instance. I don't need a permit from government to heal. I don't need to be a doctor with some, to be part of their system to heal people. For God's sake, all I need is your agreement and consent to heal you in a private capacity outside or foreign to the United States law. Therefore, now, this again, it's not some shield or protect. It's you must. It's all in here. These external things. Again, your private association. What's it made of? It's made of words. Okay? It is not what protects you. It is your combined collective power that you have together that will protect you. If someone goes on the stand, they better damn well stand up and say, no, I was acting privately. We're not, they have to have your back. You have to have an understanding of all this. Otherwise, your association is going to mean crap when they come knocking at your door. So it's a spiritual thing you're doing, meaning you're exercising the authority of your God-given rights in a private capacity through the association, which is merely a evidentiary thing that allows you to basically communicate with you're not incorporated, you're not any of that, but you still can say, look, here's how we're operating. We're foreign from your law. You have no jurisdiction here. But you gotta believe it. It has to be your faith. And just like a true Christian follower of Christ means a follower of the law, not a flattering title,
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. That really confirms the paths that I've been led down, and like I received full body goosebumps when you were speaking on. Yes, Allie, totally. We can talk about that in the after hours. That gentleman that you're speaking of is also Vatican related, unfortunately, but we won't get into that publicly because we are still live. And Laurel, you are most welcome to, do you want to share your question now? You're welcome.
So thank you so much, Clint. I've been geeking out on all your info. I wanted to know how you discovered all this stuff. And I want to know your sources, not like, what are your sources, Clint? But like, literally, I want to know your sources so that I too can know.
That's exactly what you should be asking. And that's why
it's the nature of everything, right? Is like just
right.
What you have been talking about. Like, no. I don't want to take what you're saying.
That's why I source everything, and it pisses a lot of people off that I because a lot of people want to have that ability to have their beliefs thrown in with the truth, and I'm like, no, this is not how it works. Here's the source. In my book, for instance, I define over 2,000 legal terms, right? I straight out of dictionaries, and I use specific dictionaries according to how Bovier's 1858 was commissioned by Congress to define the terms of the Constitution. What other dictionary am I going to use? Right, I use this dictionary for this purpose, or this dictionary, the purpose they're intended, right? So I have a really, I oversource, and a lot of people I think are turned off by it because it's like, it almost sounds like I don't have an opinion of my own, right? But anything you want a source for, simply ask. I mean, do you have something specific?
I think the information is so overwhelming. I was kind of thinking, like, what are your top 3 favorite things? I've already got the Bible, got that down, but like any other sources that you like, your top ones, just for the comprehension of law and who you are?
Well, like I said, the Bible, you cannot just read the Bible. I recommend a source called blueletterbible.org. And at that source, they have all the dictionaries and Bible dictionaries, Easton's Bible Dictionary, Webster's 1828. Webster 1828 dictionary is by far the best dictionary. It's very highly respected, and it goes into has a lot of Bible references. It's extremely helpful to understand terms in their different arts or their different words are called terms of art depending on which art they're in. So law is an art, the medical profession is an art, botany is an art. And so each word will change its meaning according to the art it's put in. So the word in law may mean something different in a different art, right? So medical, anything, any profession that you have, you'll have your own terms. And so Webster's goes into, I think, better than anybody, most of those terms. My book, one of the first things it goes into is which sources I'm using. So King James Bible, and the reason for that is because you got to remember that our common law system came from England. That the King James Bible is a copyrighted law book of the Crown, and so it was transferred over as our common law too. All the maxims of law did not change. In other words, so you can delve into other Bibles, but what happens is, especially with Bibles, because people ask this all the time, which Bible should I be reading? And unfortunately, in English, the answer is none of them. You have to go take Blue Letter Bible, for instance. If you go and you pull up a verse or you're reading, it'll have the terms there. You click on the term or the word, and you can then read the Strong's Concordance, which is another invaluable book, because it really really lets you know what these terms mean in the realm we're speaking of. And then the lexicons, which are the, Thayer's Greek lexicon and all these. So the thing about the Bible is, it starts up here with the most ancient texts, and then it sort of forms this pyramid of translations. And the farther you can go up, to the point where you're in the Greek or the, Latin or whatever the Hebrew, depending on which region it came from, the farther you can go back, you're going to find that the terms and the words meant something much different than they do in English, because English is a slave language. You're not meant to be able to read the Bible and get anything from it without going back to the intent of its authors. And why would you want to try? Why would you want to apply your own terminology or definitions? So my recommendation is Blue Letter Bible, because you can click on every time it says God or Lord, you can click on it. And it'll have, there's one section called the names of God, which confuses everybody. What is Elohim? Why is it plural? All of these concepts. And, I tried to explain this in my book to help people really, get that down, because that's what I had to do. I had to go back and forth between the legal and the Bible, and I used that tool a lot, mostly because you can copy and paste. But, just what does that word really mean? Because as it's used, it doesn't really make sense. I looked up the word nail, like the nail in the cross. It's always used metaphorically. So how, there's no, it turns out that it's talking about a public notice that you nail to it's amazing that the things you discover. It says in the Bible, it'll say that all men, all followers of Christ must be crucified, right? So if you're going to call yourself a Christian, I'm going to ask you, well, why aren't you hanging on the cross? And the answer is because crucifixion is it's a word that means something completely different than nailing somebody on a cross. Circumcision does not mean cutting off. That's a Jewish tradition. Circumcision means separating yourself. See, until you get the real meanings of these words, you're not going to understand. And so when I say Blue Letter Bible or any other thing that guides you to the concordances, that is just the one that was my favorite. So like I said, I list the dictionaries I used in the book and their specific reasons behind using them, so there's no doubt that it's the best source. And at least as far as I can tell. And I'm limited to my own understanding of things, so I would certainly not reject anybody who says, "Well, I'm wrong in this particular instance. You used your own translation." I'd love to know when I'm wrong, because I must correct myself, just like she was talking about in the beginning. But
You're in.
When it comes to
temple, you're
when it comes to self-evident truth, what is self-evident? It's really difficult to argue. That's the problem.
Oh, it's so good. It's really beautifully said. I think this is a great stopping point, and we can go to temple after hours. Clint, thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
And just giving your all. And if you are new to the temple, if this was your first time and you guys want to join, you can join us at templesequoia.com. And Tim is compiling a list of all the links here. And sometime I need to get a list of where people can get your books. Clint, if you could let us know where can people find your books? Where can they buy or donate towards that and find your work?
Well, everything's free. Like I said, I decided that at the outset. So I've been severely censored, shadow banned, whatever they're calling it. So unless you type in the exact term, which is realityblogger.wordpress.com, that's my blog for the last 13, 14 years. Unless you get to it, you will not find it through any kind of search. It's pretty amazing, and one of those things that have made me go like, oh, this kind of censorship, if people knew, and especially how it feels to be essentially erased from the search engines. But if you type in that exact address, Blogger has one G. So realityblogger.wordpress.com. The book can be downloaded at strawmanstory.info. And there's donation links on there. I generally don't ask. The only thing I ask is if you do want to. A lot of people don't like digital, reading off a computer, and that's why I had this printed. It's large. It's like 1,300 pages or whatever, but it is also it's a dictionary. It's like learning a new language. And so I'm happy to send that to people, at cost or free if they need it. Otherwise, I just ask for a donation, and that keeps me doing what I'm doing, which is putting everything out for free. And it's not a, certainly not a millionaire, not even a thousandaire. It's just a way of
donate to each other. It's the right thing to do, because we really want to support those that support us and are like-minded to keep our micro communities really thriving. So our people are happy to donate to your cause, and we will definitely be putting a link on the temple with this video for people to be sure. Well, this is the official outro for our first official call at the portal. And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of my reflections after sitting through a beautiful 2.5 hour conversation with Clint Richards. And also we had like an hour and a half to 2 hours of temple after hours, where we essentially just turned the camera off and allowed temple members to really dialogue and get to know our guest of honor. In this case today, it was Clint. And there was some really incredible shares from that. And if you're watching this and you are, already going down the path of the UCC, the secure party creditor, I really hope that this video can encourage you to at least do some research and to ask yourself in your heart, like, is that the highest path for you? In the end, when we were discussing, he talked about some of the ways to truly protect ourselves, and this was off air, and I'll give a little synopsis. Essentially, the best thing he could recommend us is to assemble out of faith, true faith, in small private groups and to protect each other within those communities. Now, typically, obviously, the best thing is to have communities on the ground. But also, don't underestimate, this is my personal take home, don't underestimate the value of coming together in community energetically. In my personal viewpoint and belief and how I have seen this reality reflect to me, this divine construct around me, everything literally reflects back to me, whether I think good thoughts or bad thoughts, everything responds. So in essence, this sacred construct is living, breathing, responding. And in my perspective, my subjective experience, it's supremely loving. And anything that you wish for, with your thoughts are prayers, right? That happens to be reflected to you in your life. So it's really important when we take on and accept ideologies. Are we accepting those of persecution? Are we accepting those of strife, of constantly being in battle? Or are we accepting those in peace? Are we accepting that we already are in heaven on earth? Now, when I look out into this physical construct, that is in fact what I experience, only because I'm hyper aware of my own thoughts, and nobody can tell me that I'm wrong because that comes from within. And just as though I am my own master over my own spirituality and my path, so are you. And nobody has the authority to supersede that. You and source, directly connected, always. So activating that connection within yourself, you're going to, excuse the noise, got guests in the temple. Activating that connection within yourself directly to source, you claim that sacred seat within yourself as throne. Now, when I use the word sovereign, this is in fact the mindset that I'm looking through. Sovereign, meaning you are the ruler of your thoughts, of your internal kingdoms. So with that being said, I'm very grateful to Clint for sharing his wisdom with us. He says he's read the book Simulation and Simulacrum like 30 times, which is like goals. I mean, I can't even read 30 sentences of it. Well, I mean, to be fair, I haven't given it that much of a shot, but I'm hoping to have Clint back again someday where he can share more and we can go into more in depth. But for now, the baby chickens are calling and I must tend to them. Thank you so much for joining and for being a part of the temple, to all of our temple members. And if you want more information on how to join the temple, you're always welcome to check out Temple Sequoia. Pay close attention to our private membership agreement. We have some stipulations in there where we are trying and striving very actively to keep our community protected and to keep our viewpoints aligned in regards to the purity of the blood. So please make sure you don't skim over that document. It is a legally binding contract between members. And so you don't want to skim through that. You want to read it all and make sure that resonates with you. And if you're joining the temple, make sure that you resonate with our doctrine and tenets. They're very sacred to us. So with that being said, beautiful people, thank you so much for enjoying the portal. This will be publicly available. And yeah, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next portal.